Hello and welcome to how AI image generating tools could be helpful or harmful. We'll be starting the webinar in a couple of moments. Once again, hello and welcome to how AI image generating tools could be helpful or harmful. We'll be starting the webinar in about a minute. Hello and welcome to how AI image generating tools could be helpful or harmful. We'll be starting in about half a minute. Hello and welcome to how AI generating tools could be helpful or harmful. We'll be starting this webinar in less than a minute. Hello and welcome to how AI image generating tools could be helpful or harmful. This session is being recorded and will be made available on demand in a couple of days after the show on the Sight Tech Global website. My name is David Ross of the Sight Tech Global team. I have a couple more housekeeping items to mention. During the Q&A portion of the breakout, please use either the Q&A box or the raise my hand feature to ask your questions. The hotkeys for raise lower hand on Mac is Option plus Y, and on Windows it's Alt plus Y. For those who raise hands, we'll be calling your name and unmuting you. And without further ado, I would like to turn this over to Kate Kalsevich, Head of Accessibility Innovation with Fable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. I'm really excited to be here. My experience is in the field of accessibility and design and front-end development. I do not have experience with AI, and I've just very recently gone into learning about that because the industry news around UX keeps bringing up AI-generated images. So I wanted to know what's the deal with this, how are these images being used, and how might they be used, and what are the risks with AI-generated images? What are the potential benefits? And so that's what we'll be talking about today. I wanted to give you a bit of background. Oh, first off, I forgot to do my identification. I identify as white, female, and disabled. I wear hearing aids in both of my ears and have since I was 6 years old. And so my investigation into AI generation started with my colleague, Sam, who is blind. So I'm hearing disabled, he's blind. We went at it with some AI generation tools. We played around with them. We looked at what happened with them. And then we came up with some trends, which I'm going to explain to you. And then we're going to do a little bit of an experiment ourselves with a couple of AI generating tools. And because of my background in digital accessibility, part of my job is being able to describe images. So we are going to put that to the test today as I describe visually for you everything that's happening while we experiment with the AI. So in general, there is an issue with AI if you don't have a diverse team of people building and testing the AI. If you don't have diverse data sets, you end up with the biases of the data and the creators of these tools embedded in the tool itself. It's a well-known challenge, especially in the hiring space, where you might have AI tools excluding people with disabilities from job competitions and all kinds of challenges that come up because of these biases. What we did, Sam and myself, is we looked at 2 AI image generation programs. There was DALL-E, and that's by OpenAI. And then there was Stable Diffusion by Dream Studio. And we wanted to know how those tools would represent disabled people and the assistive devices that they use visually. Both of these tools use a process called diffusion, which takes a pattern of random dots and gradually alters that pattern into images in a step-by-step process. OpenAI uses an implementation of GPT-3 to train DALL-E 2 with sets of text and image pairs. They haven't revealed their exact data set. On the Stable Diffusion side of things, they are using the 2B English language label subset of Lion 5B. If you probably have to be an AI geek to understand what that means, but I just wanted to explain what the data sets running these are. And so Stable Diffusion, the same way a search engine indexes web pages, their data set is indexing images and their description. So they're actually relying on alternative text. And that particular data set crawled through almost 6 billion images and described pairs. And they had to filter that down because not all of the images had alt text and not all of them had great alt text. And then they ended up with a smaller subset of images. So that's essentially my understanding of AI generation tools, and it's just based on the research I did with Sam. Again, I'm not an expert in this space, but we wanted to explore the idea of inclusion and representation. So I want to pause here and open it up for questions or comments in case anybody has any at the moment. And I don't see anything in the Q&A or raised hands. Okay, so we will move forward. So I do have a question for all of you. And my question is, have any of you used an AI image generation tool yet to date? And if you have, you can just pop it into, maybe we'll use the chat for that, and I'll keep an eye on that as well. And we do have one question from AJ. Oh, chat is disabled. Thank you for that. Then we'll just use the Q&A to drop in the names of the AI generation tools. So I'm going to answer the first question, which is what defines good versus bad alt text? My personal opinion on that, just based on my experiences working with a lot of people who use screen readers, is you want to give just enough information so that they can have a similar understanding of the image as somebody who could see it. It's about not being too verbose, not giving too much detail, because everyone's busy and they don't need an entire book written about an image, but it's about understanding the context of the image and the message that you're trying to convey with that image. It's about making sure that this is an informative image and not a decorative image. So it's actually adding value. It's not just there for decoration. So that's my explanation of what I think is good versus bad alt text. So we have one person who's used DALL-E. One person questions whether the tools would actually be screen reader accessible. When I did my experiment with Sam, he didn't run the AI image generator, I did. And I described everything for him as we went. So I don't have any insights as to whether or not they are actually accessible. But if anyone's used it, definitely drop that in. So Vanna is a tool. I've actually never heard of that one. AJ was asking about data sets. But I am not quite understanding what that is in context with. Margaret has used image descriptions available with the iPhone. So folks have, maybe even if you haven't used the particular tools, there is that experience with AI as it relates to images. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the trend that I noticed. And if I can just call on David and KB to maybe clear out the chat and the Q&A, the Q&A as I answer, so that I can see the new ones as they come in as well. Thank you. So the trends that Sam and I noticed when we use these AI image generation tools was, first off, there was a focus on people in wheelchairs as representative of disability. So if you typed in disabled woman, disabled man, disabled person, the by far most common imagery you would get with somebody in a wheelchair, which is obviously not the most common disability. So we shouldn't see that kind of representation, but it's amazing how there's that strong tie to the visual of, I know what a wheelchair looks like, that represent disabilities. The other trend we saw was the AI would often only show the part of a person's body that was using an assistive device. So if somebody was in a wheelchair, it would focus on their torso, it would cut off the top of their head, maybe their feet. If somebody was using crutches, it might, only do from the neck down, because that's where the device is. We saw canes where it was even focusing on just the tip of the cane. Or the hand that was holding the cane. If it was a hearing aid, the image would focus on the ear only and not show the person's face or the rest of their body. So definitely that was happening. We also saw that they didn't really know what assistive devices looked like, or they didn't render them correctly, or they didn't put them in the right place on the body. I will get to Kevin's question. I see that one in the chat in a second, but I want to just finish this bit about trends. So of course, myself wearing hearing aids, mine are very small. They sit deep in my ear canal. You don't really see them unless you're looking at like the perfect angle of my head from the side, but they're bigger hearing aids. They go in the ear canal. There's a tube that connects to behind the ear. So we would expect that there are some pictures of hearing aids on the internet and that an AI image generator would be able to understand what a hearing aid looks like, but not at all. It has no idea. It has like a rough sense. It doesn't know to put, the part that's supposed to go behind the ear. It'll just stick it randomly somewhere on the head. It'll put it, the part that goes behind the ear in the ear canal. It'll have it like, just in these weird spots. So we're definitely seeing a misunderstanding of how an assistive device is worn and what they look like. The other trend we saw, because of course Sam is blind, so we wanted to see, what does hearing aids look like and what would blind people look like to an AI image generator. And by far, it was always showing people who are blind with their eyes closed. And I know, sometimes people who are blind do close their eyes, but lots of people don't. Not everyone walks around with their eyes closed. Sometimes people are wearing dark glasses. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they have clear glasses that have some sort of Bluetooth in them. So we're definitely seeing strange trends here that weren't representative. And then we were also seeing misrepresentation of the physical characteristics of certain types of disabilities, like Down syndrome, where there's a certain physical characteristic with the eyes of somebody who's got Down syndrome, and we would expect to see, if we typed in man with Down syndrome, that physical characteristic, the particular eye shape represented in the images, and it wasn't getting that right. And then it was also doing something when we tried to give it an invisible disability like autism, which really isn't, it has no physical representation. There's usually no assistive devices. There's no physical characteristics associated with autism at all. It was trying to give physical characteristics, whether it be the position of the body or facial expression, and it was just doing strange things with people to try to guess what autism looks like. So that was really unnerving, I would say. I'm just going to pause and go over to the Q&A. How is cane or dog guide dog or braille display described? We're actually going to go to an interactive portion. So let's keep that question open, because we are going to run some of these terms through the AI image generator in a moment and see what it actually comes up with. And I will describe that to you. And Margaret makes the point, it could get confused with earbuds. Yeah, definitely. Although you would expect the alt text, if it's learning from alternative descriptions of images, the alt text for a hearing aid should be very clear. And it's hard to say, other than like, for sure, it's not getting diverse images. If it doesn't know what disability looks like or an assistive device, it doesn't have a good enough data set, in my opinion. So my next question for the audience here is, what use case would a blind person have for an AI image generation tool? I have a couple of ideas, but I'm curious to hear from the audience if you would use a tool like this and you don't see, or you do see, what would you expect somebody who can't see to use a tool like this for? And the thing that Sam came up with was improving the quality of selfies. So if you're taking a picture of yourself, maybe an AI image generation tool could give you some advice as to whether that photo is in focus, maybe suggest improvements or touch up to that photo, and just getting you better quality photos that you're taking. And it doesn't even have to be a selfie, because, you know, maybe you're taking a photo of a family event and the AI image generator tool could help, you know, piece together the picture or fix some of the blurring, or, you know, give you something really creative as a filter. Photos that family give you, Facebook, yeah. And I think there's a bit of a blur too between tools that describe images and tools that create images from descriptions. And I find that very interesting, because I feel like there's a connection there that if both were better, they can help improve each other. So like, if a tool is good at taking a text and generating an image, that same could be reversed, and it should be good at recognizing things in an image and describing them in text. So there's definitely something there. The other thing I thought would be useful is creating art, because why not? I do think it's interesting that, you know, if you create art that you can't see, I myself am terrible with music because of my hearing disability. I can't really sing on key. I don't really know what off key sounds like. I don't really hear the subtleties in music. So if I had an AI audio tool, that could benefit me, and I could see similar things happening. Margaret makes the point in getting photos and presentations needed for work. And I think for something like that, you'd have to have a really good trust in the tool that you're going to get a good photo. Kevin say, write the word to the picture in my head and have it visually shown. Connecting to tactile display like Orbit, Graffiti, or Dot Pad to see results rather than relying on attempted alt text. That sounds very interesting. That's from Kala. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I don't know what Orbit, Graffiti, or Dot Pad are, but I think that's cool. Okay. What I'm going to do now is start the screen share, and I am going to just double checking too. I'm going to see if I see any hands raised before I pop over there. Okay. And we're going to play with some of these tools. So we're going to start with Kevin's suggestion about how is a cane or a guide dog or a braille display described. And so what I've done is I've opened up, I've got my screen set. I've got 2 tabs in Chrome. One is with Dream Studio and the other is with DALL-E. Both of these tools are set up to generate 4 images at once. So there's a text input, you input your text, there's a button you press, and it generates 4 images. There's some default images in there that I put in to test already. I'm on Dream Studio, and it comes with a default prompt, which is A Dream of a Distant Galaxy by Caspar David Friedrich, matte painting trending on ArtStation HQ. And from that, it generated 4 images that are, they look like space to me, like we're kind of, on a different planet. There's a bit of a blur to the background, a very soft focus. There's some pastel colors coming through. And there's figures in each of the images. They're from the back. You're looking at the person from the back. You don't see their face. And they're wearing long robes and long flowing robes. And then there are these rock protrusions happening. And they're quite pretty. And if I switch over to DALL-E, we've got 4 images with the exact same prompt. And again, the same kind of space vibe. I would say the colors over here, there's less of the purples and more of the blues and the yellows. So they feel a bit colder to me. And I see rocks floating around in the sky too, almost like meteors. And the figures in these images are a bit smaller. So it feels like you're farther away. So this is the difference between the two of them. But we are going to do, maybe we'll take the cane. Well, you wouldn't use a cane with the guide dog. So I feel like we want to do one or the other. Why don't we explore a man walking with a guide dog? And I'm going to type this into DALL-E first. And it takes a while to generate. So I might start that one and then flip over to Dream Studio while it's rendering. So what it does is it shows a progress bar and it's about 30% through. And in the meantime, I'm going to flip over to Dream Studio and pop that prompt in at the bottom. With DALL-E, the prompt is at the top of the screen. With Dream Studio, it's at the bottom. And so I'm going to flip back. It's 99% done with DALL-E. And it's just about to load the images. Okay, I'm going to pop over and see Dream Studio done. Okay, so I've got 4 images of a man. They all look to be, I would say, maybe in their 50s. 3 of the men are facing away, so we're looking at their back. And one of the men is facing towards the screen, and we're looking at the front. They all seem to be middle-aged and white. In the top left corner, and interestingly enough, all of these look like yellow labs. So like every guide dog out there is a yellow lab. And I wonder if that has to do with the types of photos that people share of guide dogs. So in the top left corner, this lab is walking beside the man behind. No leash, no harness, nothing there. There's a little bit of white kind of threads coming from the man's hands that could be the remnants of the leash, but they're not attached to the dog at all. The next photo, there is definitely some sort of harness. And the man is holding it, but it's not the harness with a handle that you would expect. It's like a leash attached to a harness. And then he's got the rest of this leash in his other hand, and it's super long and kind of dragging on the ground. Bottom left corner, that is the man walking away, and it's a lab. The dog is facing the opposite direction. So the person is walking away from us. The dog is walking towards us. This obviously does not work. The dog has sort of a bit of a harness, but again, not the harness with the handle that you would expect. It's more leash-like than anything. And then the very last photo, they're both facing towards, as if they're walking towards me. And this dog has all sorts of like harness contraptions with a bit of yellow like reflective tape, which seems like a good safety thing to have, but it's still not a proper harness with a handle that you would expect to see. It's more several leashes coming out of this harness. The man is holding leashes in both of his hands. There's at least 3 of them coming out of the harness. So it's more like, I don't know, reins of a horse than a harness for a dog. So that's really interesting. We will pop over to DALL-E, which has, I told you it was slow. It just finished generating these images. So here I've got, in the first photo, it's a black man. And he's kind of walking across, neither towards or away, but to the left of the screen. His guide dog is a black lab. The other 3 are all yellow labs. And he's so far the only person of color we've seen, because the other 3 in this image set, they're all white men. And his dog has a harness, but there's a leash attached to the harness. So it's not a guide dog harness. And he looks like he's almost carrying a cane in his left hand, which at the beginning I caught myself there. You just wouldn't use a cane with a guide dog. So definitely inaccurate there. The next photo is a man. The dog has a bit of a harness, but he's just holding a leash and he's walking away from us. And here we're seeing the head cut off too. The focus is on the dog and the man's body and the hand and the leash. The next photo, it's interesting because this one, the man is walking in a parking lot and there is a wheelchair sign in one of the parking spots that he's currently walking over. And it's a yellow lab, and he thought somewhat of a harness. This one maybe comes closest to a harness because it's a bit of a loop. And the man has his hand on the loop that's coming from the dog, that it's kind of coming close. And then the last one, again, is just a leash. We've got a couple more suggestions coming in, but I'm cognizant of the time, and I want to do a bit of a wrap up before. But both DALL-E and Stable Diffusion through Dream Studio, they're free to use. You get a certain number of credits. You have to put in an email and verify your email. So they're definitely things you can play with on your own. I'm just going to have a quick look at it and see if it actually, I don't think it would generate any alt text, but I'm going to have a look just in case. But I suspect there's nothing there. No, there is not. So it feels like a tricky tool to interact with if you don't have somebody giving you that visual output. So just to wrap up, let me stop the screen share here. I want to say that it's really important that we're generating images that accurately represent disability and assistive device, especially if these images are going to start be used widely in the world, which I think they will be really quickly. So I'm quite worried that we get these, images that are completely unrealistic and off. This can, perpetuate stereotype, present people in a negative light, and then just cause harm to the disabled community and the non-disabled community alike. We all benefit from diversity and, regardless of who we are. So we really need to start seeing that in AI. And the big thing I want to point out is I think this experiment and the experiments I've done with Sam point out that it's not just a gap in the data being used to train AI, but it's a gap in the lack of representation of disability in the media, right? Because there are not enough images, is my assumption. There are just not enough images of disabled people for the AI tool to be able to generate these accurate representation. And we can definitely see that in the media where we just don't see disabled people in advertising and television and movies. And it's getting better, but it's still not where it needs to be. And as the world becomes more and more virtual, our reality is going to be shaped by what we see on the screen. And I'm worried about that future with my small little experiment into AI. So we have to be really careful about what we do with AI tools and how we teach them and the end results with that. And I'm going to pass it back to David at this point.
Thank you very much, Kate. I have a couple of announcements related to this. While our panel is up today, please remember that this session will be available on demand in a couple of days at the Site Tech Global website. You can return now to the global website to catch the main stage session. And thank you very much. By the way, just one note for the person who asked how DALL-E was trained. It was trained with 400 million captioned images from the internet. So your whole comment, Kate, about what was represented in the media is absolutely correct based upon how DALL-E was trained. Thank you all very much.